Welcome to a deep dive into something we all do all the time, but rarely stop to think about perception. How do we actually experience the world around us?
Hmm, that's true. We take our senses for granted.
Right. We just see, hear, touch, but have you ever stopped to really think about what's going on when you see a color or hear a melody?
Or even something as simple as reaching for a cup of coffee. It's
Mm.
amazing when you actually think about it.
Totally. Well, today we're going to be diving into this fascinating world by exploring excerpts from Phenomenology of Perception by Maurice Merleau-Ponty. He was this French philosopher who really makes you re-examine those everyday experiences in a whole new light. And honestly, some of this stuff blew my mind when I first read it.
Yeah, Merleau-Ponty, he really challenges a lot of assumptions about how we typically think about the world, how we understand it. He argues that traditional science, while obviously super important, it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story.
Right. When it comes to our actual subjective experiences, it's not like science is wrong.
No, not at all.
It's just that there's this whole other layer, this richness to our experiences that we might miss if we only focus on that kind of objective data.
He makes a great point in the preface, actually. He uses this analogy about a painting. It's like trying to understand the beauty of a painting, like the whole impact, by only analyzing, the chemical composition of the paint.
Oh, wow.
Technically, yeah, you're getting some information there, but
You're missing the whole point, the art of it.
ex-
So if traditional science doesn't give us the full picture, how does he suggest we approach understanding perception?
well, he dives right into this idea that our minds, they're not just passively receiving information about the world around us, they're actively involved, actively shaping how we experience it.
That almost sounds like a radical idea. What kind of examples does he use to actually back that up?
Well, he talked about how a child's perception of color develops.
Okay.
Did you know that for like the first 9 months of their lives, babies don't see distinct colors the way we do. They just see shades of light and dark.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And then gradually they start differentiating warm and cool tones before they're finally able to perceive, the full spectrum of colors.
So you're telling me for the first 9 months of our lives, we're basically seeing the world in black and white?
In a way, yeah. It's amazing, right? And that gradual development of color vision in children, it highlights that our minds are actively constructing our visual experience. It's not just our eyes passively receiving light.
Okay, that's pretty wild. So it's not just that our brains are interpreting the information differently, it's that our actual experience of the world is being shaped by our minds.
Exactly.
Mm.
And it's not just with things like color. Merleau-Ponty talks about optical illusions too,
Okay, like what?
like the Miller-Lyer illusion. You know, that one with the two lines that appear to be different lengths because of the arrows at their ends?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Right. And they're actually the same length.
Exactly. They are the same length, but our brains just stubbornly perceive them differently. He uses these illusions to show that we don't perceive things in isolation.
Mm.
The whole context, it influences what we see.
It's like our brain is trying to make sense of the world,
Yes.
filling in the gaps based on whatever information it has, kind of like when you're trying to figure out a word in a sentence and you only catch a few of the words, so you use the context to fill in the blanks.
Precisely. Our brains are constantly creating a coherent picture, even if it means bending the rules a little bit.
Mm.
This active construction of perception is not just happening on a conscious level either. It's deeply rooted in our bodily experience, in what Merleau-Ponty calls the body schema.
Body schema. Okay. I think we need to unpack this a little bit. It sounds kind of complex.
Sure, think of it this way. Your body, it isn't just an object that you observe from the outside, like you would look at, a table or chair. You experience it from within. You feel it, you move it, you sense it in space. That internal perspective, that feeling of embodiment, that's crucial, absolutely crucial to how we interact with the world.
So it's not just about having a body, it's about that lived experience of being in your body.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what he means by the body schema.
Hmm?
It's this pre-reflective awareness we have of our bodies and where they are in space. It's like you just know where your limbs are without even having to consciously think about it.
Right. Like I don't have to look at my arm right now to know where it is, in relation to my computer or the cup of coffee on my desk. It's just this intuitive understanding.
Exactly. And that intuitive understanding, that's what guides our movements and actions.
Hmm.
He uses the example of, reaching for something.
Okay.
You don't sit there, you don't consciously calculate the distance or trajectory of your arm, but you still just effortlessly reach out and grab it. It's your body schema. This deep, embodied understanding of spatial relationships. That's what's at work there.
That actually reminds me of something I read about phantom limb experiences.
Oh, interesting.
People who've lost a limb can still feel sensations like in that missing limb, right? Could that be related to this whole body schema idea?
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
And yes, Merleau-Ponty actually talks about phantom limb
Yeah.
experiences. He suggests that they really highlight this complex relationship between our physical bodies and our perception.
Hmm.
Even when our physical body changes, our body schema, this internal map, our internal map of our body, it can persist, creating these phantom sensations.
Wow. That's incredible. So even though our physical body changes, our brain's map, its internal representation, can actually hold on to that previous form.
Yeah, it's really something.
It really makes you question what we even mean by physical and mental,
Yeah, right.
and how intertwined those two really are.
Absolutely. And this intertwining of the body and mind, it's not just limited to our own, individual experience.
Okay, how so?
Well, this is where things get even more interesting. Merleau-Ponty argues that this same body schema, this embodied way of being in the world, it's what shapes how we perceive other people too.
So you're saying that my experience of being in my body influences how I understand and interact with other people.
Exactly. Because we experience the world through our bodies, we're able to perceive other people not just as, objects, but as subjects,
Hmm.
as beings with their own experiences and intentions, just like us.
Mm.
It's like we recognize ourselves in others,
Mm.
not through some kind of, logical deduction,
Yeah.
but through this shared experience of having a body and moving through the world together.
That's such a different way of thinking about it. We usually think of understanding other people as this intellectual exercise, like I observe their behavior, I analyze it, and then I infer their thoughts.
Yeah.
But Merleau-Ponty is saying it's something much more primal than that, more intuitive almost.
Exactly. He argues that this shared embodiment allows for a much more direct perception of other people's emotions, their intentions, even just their very existence as conscious beings.
Mm.
We're not just isolated minds trying to figure each other out. We're bodies coexisting in the world. And that shared experience, it shapes how we perceive and understand each other on a very fundamental level.
So it's less about thinking and more about feeling, about recognizing like a shared humanity through our bodies.
Yes, precisely. And this leads to some fascinating insights into how we understand concepts like sexuality.
Sexuality, how does it tie in?
Well, Merleau-Ponty, he says that sexuality isn't just this separate biological drive, like hunger or thirst.
Okay.
Instead, it's deeply intertwined with our lived experience as embodied beings.
Mm.
It influences how we see ourselves, how we relate to others, even just how we move through the world. It's not confined to this separate realm of our being, but it colors our entire experience.
That's such a different way of thinking about it. It's often viewed as separate from our other experiences.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense in light of what we've been talking about with embodiment.
Right.
It's not just about our physical bodies, but about how we experience ourselves and the world as a whole.
Exactly. And he doesn't stop there. Merleau-Ponty connects these ideas about embodiment to even broader concepts, things like time, language, even the search for meaning.
Whoa. Okay, so we've gone from how babies see color to the meaning of life. That's quite a jump.
Well, that's the beauty of Merleau-Ponty's work. He shows how these seemingly disparate aspects of our experience,
Mhm.
they're actually deeply intertwined. And he does it all through the lens of this embodied perception that we've been discussing.
I have to admit, I'm really starting to see the world a little differently after reading this. Yeah.
Even just thinking about time, it's not just this abstract concept of minutes and seconds.
Right.
It's something I experience through my body, through memories, through the rhythm of my day.
That's a great point. Merleau-Ponty would say that time isn't just this linear progression like a ticking clock. It's something we actively experience and shape through our perception.
So how does he explain that? What does he use as an example?
Well, he talks about how a familiar place can evoke such a strong sense of the past.
Hmm.
Like you walk into your childhood home and suddenly you're flooded with all these memories, all these emotions. It's like the past is still present in a way, woven into the fabric of that present experience.
Well, that's so true. It's like the past isn't really gone. It's just layered beneath the surface of the present. Yeah.
And we can almost reach out and touch it through our senses, through our memories.
Exactly. And he links this idea of embodied time to language as well.
Okay.
He argues that words, they aren't just labels for these pre-existing thoughts, but that they're actually tools that help us organize and give meaning to our experiences.
That's fascinating. So instead of language just being this passive tool for describing the world, it's actively shaping how we perceive and understand it.
Precisely. Think about how a powerful story can transport you to another world.
Mm,
It can evoke such strong emotions, even physical sensations,
right.
all through these symbols that we've created.
Mm.
Language has this incredible power because it's so deeply intertwined with our bodily experience.
So it's like when I read a story about a character walking through a forest, I'm not just processing the words on the page. I'm drawing on my own experiences of walking, of being in nature,
Mhm.
feeling the ground beneath my feet, the sun on my skin.
Exactly.
It's those embodied experiences that give the words their power.
Yes. And he goes even further to argue that the way we learn language, especially as children, it reveals this deep connection between our bodies, our senses, and our ability to even grasp these abstract concepts.
So how we learn language as children can tell us something about how we perceive and understand the world as adults.
Absolutely. Think about it. Children don't learn language by just like sitting down and memorizing definitions.
Right.
They learn by interacting with the world, by using their bodies, by pointing at things, imitating sounds.
Yeah.
Language acquisition is this incredibly embodied process, deeply intertwined with their sensory experiences
Yeah.
and their developing understanding of the world around them.
That's so true. When you think about how kids learn, it's all about exploration, play, and using their senses to make sense of things. It's
Exactly.
not just like this abstract intellectual exercise.
And Merleau-Ponty would argue that this embodied way of learning language, it shapes how we continue to understand and interact with the world throughout our lives.
Hmm.
It's not like we suddenly switch to a purely intellectual mode of being once we've mastered language.
So if we bring all of this back to the bigger picture, it seems like Merleau-Ponty is challenging this traditional view of the mind as separate from the body, of knowledge as something that we acquire through pure reason.
Yes.
He's saying that our understanding of the world, including those big abstract concepts like time, language, and meaning, it actually emerges from our lived experience.
Mhm.
From this dynamic interplay between our bodies, our senses, and the world around us.
Exactly. It's a radical shift in perspective.
Hmm.
And it has profound implications for how we understand ourselves, our relationships with others, and even our place in the world.
It's like he's completely flipping the script. Instead of the mind being this detached observer, it's like we're actively creating our understanding of the world through our interactions with it.
Exactly. It's a much more dynamic and honestly a much more empowering way of looking at things. And this idea of embodied perception, it doesn't just apply to abstract concepts like, you know, time and language.
Oh, really?
It even shapes how we understand those things we think of as, purely physical, like our own vision.
Hmm. That's interesting. We always hear that phrase, seeing is believing, as if our vision is this direct line to objective truth. But Merleau-Ponty would probably say that's not the whole story.
Not at all. In fact, he directly challenges that idea.
Hmm.
He says that vision, it's not just about passively receiving visual data.
Okay.
It's about actively engaging with the world, seeking out meaning and making sense of what we see, but through the lens of our own experiences, our own unique perspective, and of course, that trusty body schema.
So how does he illustrate that? What kind of example does he use?
Well, he uses this really powerful analogy about a blind man using a cane.
Okay.
And he says that the cane, it's not just an extension of the man's arm, but it actually becomes incorporated into his body schema.
Wow. So the blind man, through using the cane, starts to experience the world through touch in a way that actually becomes part of his perception, part of his body schema.
Precisely. It's like the cane becomes a part of him, extending his perception beyond his physical body. He's not just seeing with his hands, he's experiencing the world in a way that integrates, touch, sound, even spatial awareness.
That's such a powerful image.
It really shows how our senses work together to create this holistic picture of the world.
It really highlights how our perception isn't limited to our five senses in isolation,
Yeah,
but it's this incredible interplay between our bodies, the tools we use, even the environment that we're in.
absolutely.
It's like our body schema is constantly adapting and expanding to incorporate all these external elements into how we experience the world.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. Remember how we were talking about language being embodied?
Yeah.
Merleau-Ponty would argue that even something like language, which, we often think of as so abstract and separate from our physical selves, can actually become integrated into our body schema.
Mm-hmm.
Words become tools tools that we use to extend our perception, to categorize, understand, even manipulate the world around us. It's fascinating.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, our perception is incredibly malleable,
Yes.
shaped by our individual experiences, by the tools we use, the language we speak even.
Right.
It really makes you wonder, is there even such a thing as objective truth then? If we're all experiencing the world through these very individual, very subjective lenses.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's
Yeah.
one that Merleau-Ponty grapples with throughout his work. He doesn't shy away from the complexities, and he doesn't necessarily offer any easy answers.
Hmm.
But he does suggest that instead of trying to eliminate subjectivity in this quest for truth, we should acknowledge the very real role that it plays in shaping our understanding.
So instead of striving for this impossible objectivity,
Yeah,
we should embrace the fact that our perspectives are shaped by, well, who we are and how we actually experience the world.
exactly. It's about recognizing that truth, it isn't this static, absolute thing out there, just waiting to be discovered.
Mm.
Instead, it emerges from our ongoing interaction with the world, from this constant dialogue between our subjective experiences and, yes, the objective reality that surrounds us.
I love that, this idea of truth as a dialogue. It's not about one side winning out over the other, like the subjective or the objective,
Right.
but about finding a kind of balance,
Yeah,
a way of holding those two perspectives in tension with each other.
precisely. And that tension, that's where things get really interesting because it pushes us to question our assumptions.
Yeah.
To be open to different perspectives, to recognize that our understanding of the world, it's always evolving.
So it's not about denying that an external world exists,
No.
but about recognizing that our perception of that world is always filtered through our own unique lens, our own experiences, our bodies.
Exactly. It's a much more nuanced and I think ultimately a more humble approach to truth.
Yeah.
One that recognizes the limitations of our own individual perspectives. And it's open to the possibility that there might be other equally valid ways of seeing things.
Wow. This deep dive into Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology of Perception has really given me a lot to think about.
It's quite a book.
It's challenged me to reconsider how I experience the world, how I perceive the people around me, even how I understand something as fundamental as truth.
It's pretty profound stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It certainly is. It's a dense and rewarding work. But that core message, I think it's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the active role that we play in shaping our own reality through our perception.
Absolutely. And that's a pretty incredible thought to leave us with today. It's a call to be more present, I think, more mindful of our own experiences, more open to those different ways of seeing and understanding the world around us.
Well said. And on that note, to our listeners, I would just say, the next time you look at a painting, listen to a piece of music, even just walk down the street, take a moment. Just take a moment to really pay attention to your own perceptions. Notice how your body, your senses, your past experiences, all of it shapes what you see, hear, and feel. You might just surprise yourself with what you discover.
What a great way to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of perception. And remember, there's always more to perceive, more to understand, and, as always, more to question.